Afternoon policy block, or morning policy block. The first one up is going to be 2016-6, which is eliminating the HD ratio from NRPM. I'm going to do the staff introduction, and then we'll have David Farmer give the AC presentation. This policy started in July 2016 as ARIN Proposal 231. The AC shepherds are Dave Farmer and Kathy Aronson. It has not been presented at a PPM or PPC. It was recommended by the AC for adoption in September, and the text is in your discussion guide and online. This policy removes all of the remaining HD ratio language from NRPM. It is intended for registration staff not to use the HD ratio method for verifying IPv6 utilization or determining IPv6 block approvals. It aligns with the current staff practice. We use Section 6 policies to determine IP initial qualification. The default community network IPv6 requester clarification is end user with an option to subscribe to a registration services plan. The policy can be implemented as written. We don't have a material legal issue with the policy. Implementation is minimal. It involves cycling the NRPM and updating our guidelines and procedures. And now presentation by the AC, David Farmer.
Okay. So we'll get rolling here. So the problem statement, HD ratios still in the NRPM, and it's really an anachronism, and it's creating some confusion. It gives people the impression that they should be measuring themselves in 56s/56s, and well, policy's always allowed a 48, getting a little bit of feedback there. Policies have always allowed a 48 for any and all end sites without need for further justification. You can use more restrictive choices like 56s, but you're not required to. This proposal doesn't change any of that. It just hopes to get rid of some of this confusion by eliminating old text. The small problem is there's a piece of policy that actually still uses it technically. And that is community networks, section 659. Just solve that, we rewrite it and don't use HD ratio, and use the current end user policies as the guide for how to do that. And this shouldn't cause a problem for anybody. If anything, the current end user policies are more liberal. This is the text for the community networks. It's in your guide here. I just got it here in the 3 slides so that we can refer to it if we need to during discussion. I'll just give you a little bit of time to look at it here. If you need to read the details, please look in your guide. The guts beyond that writing is deleting a few of the no longer needed sections. There are 2 definitions. The definition of utilization regarding B6, and then the HD ratio itself, and then a section about the HD ratio that includes a very large table. Repeating staff and legal assessments, basically there's no material issues. ARIN staff, it aligns with what ARIN staff is doing today. They currently don't use HD ratio. And it can be implemented quite easily. This summarizes some additional comments from staff, kind of what John was talking about, that an end user, that the default definition for community networks is end user. all end users can get a registration services plan if they wish. And then frequently most community networks can probably apply as an ISP if they wish. The whole point of this policy, of the community networks policy, is to make it so they don't have to do that if they don't want to, but they can. And so limiting HD ratio has seemed non-controversial. There's been no objections or concerns raised, and overall there seems to be community support. The three policies that I've got listed down here at the bottom of the slide, rework of IPv6 allocations and or assignments, and then a better IPv6 allocations for ISPs, are the work that has basically orphaned HD ratio. And so that we no longer, with those policies, we no longer depend on HD ratio. So this really started 6 years ago. We're finishing it up. The primary goal of this is to eliminate HD ratio. Rewriting community networks is necessary to do that, but if we don't like that, we can delete it too. However, there seems to be support for the rewrite. So, time for discussion. Do you support eliminating HD ratio? Do you support the rewritten text for community networks? And if anyone has any objections or concerns, get to a microphone. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. You know the drill. Walk up to a microphone if you wish to comment. We have a recommended draft policy. And we will shake it up. Oh, we lost a microphone. We'll go start over there on the far right microphone.
Hi, Bill Sandiford, ARIN Board. I'm just speaking as myself, but partially as the treasurer as well too. With regards to HD ratios and all that stuff, I have no concerns, but I have a little bit of a concern with the specific mentioning of fee structure in the NRPM, which I don't necessarily think we should be talking about fees in the NRPM. I think as a member of the board, happy to consider any feedback from the community, but would like to see this done in a way that doesn't specifically drive things towards fees in the NRPM.
You want to address that, or?
I think those comments in the policy refer to the original intent of the community networks policy, and unfortunately fees were intertwined with all of that. And I think that's a historical artifact, and I don't think I can just, make it go away. But I don't think that's the primary point of this, though.
Noting that I don't think it's the primary point, just thinking that I've never believed that fees or this kind of treatment of fees should be in the NRPM. We have fee schedules and other stuff like that to deal with that, and I think I'd like to see if we can get a way to get this done without specifically mentioning that.
Yeah, I think the concern here, maybe it's past treasurer and me going, you have text that suggests what the fee would be, and it says here, shall be treated as end user assignment both, and unless or until the board adopts a specific more favorable fee structure. So it feels very much like a suggestion in NRPM. John?
Yeah, I guess the guidance to the AC is that to the extent that there is implied guidance for fees in the NRPM, the possibility exists that the board would not ratify the policy even if sent. That's not assured either way. It could easily proceed anyway, but to the extent that you want to have the highest chance of success, it would be best to put the fees in either the policy problem statement or the additional comments, and not in the text that ends up verbatim in NRPM.
Okay, all addressed. He's disappeared, so I guess front microphone.
Owen DeLong, Akamai, ARIN AC, and author of the proposal. It does not attempt to set fees or constrain fees in any way. It simply says that the fee structure that shall apply to these particular allocations shall be X, and Throughout the NRPM, we do that by virtue of declaring things either end user or ISP policy, and we have end user and ISP free structures and have had for a long time. And should the board choose to eliminate the end user fee structure, they're certainly within their ability to do that without being constrained by this policy. So I don't see that this is an inappropriate use of policy to constrain or set fees, because it doesn't constrain or set fees in any real way. It just says as long as this fee structure exists, these particular allocations fit into this portion of it, and other allocations fit into other portions. And we define those in other places in the NRPM as well.
Go ahead.
To the extent that it says these shall be treated as end user, I agree with you. The extent that it says that these shall be treated as end user, unless and until the board adopts a particular fee schedule, is not what the same meaning. So just, if you want to identify that these are end user, shall be treated as end user, that's fine. But there is an actual language that says, until such time as the board adopts a more favorable fee schedule. And that means...
And that is copied verbatim from the existing policy.
Right, and the point is, if we're going to change policy and it contains languages that reference fees, then the board may consider that it's not something it wants to continue doing just because in the past it was done.
Did you have another comment on it?
Yeah, I fully support the policy as written. If you need to strike that sentence to make the board happy, I can live with it, but I personally think it's disingenuous.
Okay. For a microphone.
Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire, NRPM. I support the policy. I don't support the text. I have brought up that I was unhappy previously with the whole fee discussion inside of the NRPM, which was ignored. I actually have a bigger concern with this, which is to eliminate HD ratio, we are changing the community networks fundamentally, not just dealing with HD ratio. I support getting rid of HD ratio. I believe in Jamaica it came back, community networks have never been used. We are changing text for something that nobody more than likely will ever use, especially now with the changes in the fee schedule that allow smaller networks, that allow smaller blocks. It has almost guaranteed the evisceration of this policy from ever being used. I have a policy proposal coming up that basically gives a much greater expansion of community networks. I would be just as happy to dump that and dump community networks completely rather than have any of the confusion surrounding it. So if this removal of the budgeting item is non-trivial or non-editorial, I would suggest to the AC that maybe the best option is to just dump community networks from this policy moving forward.
So, well, the editorial, whether it's an editorial change would obviously be up to the AC itself. And
right. So if it was purely editorial,
yeah,
I'd be happy moving this forward and dealing with the bigger issue of community networks at a later date. But if this is non-trivial, then I would revisit as part of this policy, just getting rid of community networks.
So in response to that, as I mentioned in the slides, we have another option. In fact, this option was discussed in the original policy. So here is an alternate policy statement, basically deleting community networks and the other sections. And this slide was included so that we could take this to last call if we so decided.
Whoa,
Hold
okay,
on.
stop the brakes here for a second. So we're discussing 2016-6 present. We cannot bring an alternative policy statement. Like, I haven't checked here. Was this something that was circulated or? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So I would just ask that we just reverse. There we go. Yeah, I'm happy for if there's not support for this today, and you want to discuss that, and we can discuss that at an open mic if necessary and all that, but we can't discuss it in the context of this policy block.
It is in, it is in the comments section for this policy originally from the proposer.
I understand, but the policy text, like I'll let you two choose.
To the extent that you're going to ask for feedback from the community on this policy proposal, then you need to make that a very clean, single question on this policy proposal. We don't entertain multiple policy proposals and or ifs, because then people don't know when they show support, is it with this statement or the alternative statement, or both? So, very clear with the AC, okay? If you have an alternative, break it up, make it a separate proposal, and then you'll see how each one gets viewed independently.
I would suggest, Dan, do you want to add something? But I would suggest let's continue with the original text for that, because first of all, we haven't yet determined if there's not support. So let's finish off on this one. We will have the poll. If after the poll, you know, if it is negative and you want, then during the open mic section, we can certainly address the alternate policy. That's no problem.
So to the recommended policy before us, I support the concept. I would support the text as written if the removal was editorial and you could move forward. Otherwise, I believe that something else is what is needed, and then go from there.
Okay. We have remote participation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a lengthier statement here from Jason Schiller, Google ASOAC. I'm all for removing the HD ratio language and making things more understandable, but removing sections 6.7 and 2.8, remove language that discusses utilization, is based on the number of /56s or /48s assigned to each downstream customer end site. I think that the following text needs to be retained somewhere. 6.7, this utilization refers to the allocation of /56s to end sites, and not the utilization of those /56s within those end sites. It is an address allocation utilization ratio and not an address assignment utilization ratio, period, end of quote. And 2.8, quote.
Chris, sorry to interrupt, do you mind just refreshing, because I think a bunch of people were turning as you said that. Did he say retain section 6.7.2.8?
Yes, somewhere, and then he...
Am I missing that there isn't a 6.7.28?
No, 6.7 and 2.8.
Oh, and
2.8.
Thank you, Owen.
Both of which are actually not operative anywhere else in the NRPM.
Thank you. I apologize, Chris. Continue.
No
So
problem.
6.7 and 2.8. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So continuing, and 2.8, quote, in IPv6, utilization is only measured in terms of the bits to the left of the /56 boundary. In other words, utilization refers to the assignment of /56s to end sites, and not the number of addresses assigned within individual /56s at those end sites, end of quote. We should certainly clarify that you can choose to assign /48 or /56 to customer end sites, but if you use /48, you get to call the /48 100% in use, and if you use /56, you only get to call the /56 bracket, not the /48 100% in use. I'm comfortable allowing community networks to qualify under end user policy.
Thank you, Chris. Did you want to make any comments on that?
If Owen, I would defer to Owen on that. If
Is it okay to have Owen first? Owen, go ahead. Did you want to, sorry, well, do you want to address Jason's comment?
Yeah, I both wanted to. I actually want to address two things. I'll address Jason's thing first.
Sure, thank you.
The definition in the remaining V6 policies, after we eliminate or modify the community networks policy of provider allocation units, actually covers everything that he says should be retained, and it uses a completely different set of criteria for defining that. So the sections that he's saying we should somehow retain actually become complete no-ops and are not referenced by any existing policy. So I don't think there's actually any need to retain them. I looked at that pretty carefully before proposing deleting them. This really is an effort to clean up a number of dangling things that we should have cleaned up when we wrote the other policies, and I'm as much at fault on that as anybody else, so I'll take the hits there. I also stand corrected. The fee structure language is not copied from the existing policy, and I erred in putting that in. So
Okay.
it is what it is. Hopefully we can make the change later, but we'll see what we end up with.
I would encourage Jason, if you still have some concerns regarding that, to maybe talk with the Shepherds and the author offline, because obviously you'd want to get that addressed, but it sounds like there's some. Did you still have a comment?
Yeah. Oh, and just for my reference, where do you believe that the allocation size and counting it as utilized is in the Section 6 policy?
If you look under the definition of provider allocation unit in the, I'm not sure if it's in section 6 or section 2.
2, okay, got it, provider allocation. Yeah, you may be right on that. It may be sufficient, it's not the same language, but it may be sufficient to cover.
No, it's actually completely different language, and,
Right.
and since the provider allocation unit is the definition used in all of the existing new policy that we passed 6 years ago, the old language in 2.8 and 6.7 is not actually utilized by any of the existing policy other than the community networks
Right.
by virtue of the HD ratio.
Go ahead.
So provider assignment unit, I'm sorry, I just want to double check. So provider assignment unit 215
Yep.
would, as long as that's read for purposes of determining utilization, you get the same effect.
Well, and specifically in section 6, it says that the way utilization is determined
Is
is
provider
based on provider
allocation.
allocation units. So, yes.
I concur that we can probably live without the 56 language in the HD ratio section, given that it's in provider allocation unit.
So before we get our next speaker, we are getting to around that time that I need to ask if you are going to speak on this policy, that you either start typing so that Chris can forward your comments into the room, or that you start making motion up to the mic. Otherwise, the mics will be closed at the end of this next comment.
Scott Lybrand, ARIN-AC, Deliver. There are two definitions in section 2. In 2.8, we have a definition of the word utilization. In 2.16, we have a definition of the word utilized. It's very strange to define the verb and the noun of the same word differently, but we've done so. So this proposal seeks to remove one of the two redundant and no longer used definitions, leaving only a single definition of the noun form of the verb form of utilized, which is the one that is currently referenced. So I think that is an improvement. I also wanted to comment on the fee schedule item. As I read it, the problematic part of that sentence is the last part that we've already talked about that says that, I can't read it now, but the part about the fees and the board adopting a more lenient thing in the later. I think the last half of that sentence after the comma could be removed as an editorial change. So that would be my position as an AC member. So I think the community should consider that I and probably a lot of other AC members have taken their feedback that that's probably something we ought to do and something that we'll try to do as editorial, and evaluate this proposal on its overall merits with the assumption that we'll probably end up fixing that, and give us your feedback on the overall proposal, not on any thing that can be fixed as an editorial thing.
Thank you. The only thing I'd just like to add, like I said, is if keeping fees out of the NRPM is important, because the board could still change fees. If it feels it requires, we review the fees all the time to make sure that they're the best fit and recovering fees as equitably as possible. What I hate to see us run into is a situation where the NRPM said one thing and the fee schedule said other, and then I just feel for the poor staff that have to explain, well, we know the policy text says this, but it's trumped by that, so sorry, no pun intended. So the microphones are now closed unless you had an ending comment. Was there, sorry, remote participation that squeezed in?
Yeah, final comments from Jason Schiller, Google. He said he was concerned about end users, but I think it's also covered in section 6.5.8.2, so he withdraws his concern.
Thank you. Let's thank Dave Farmer for the presentation. And we're pretty much right on time for a break, but it was a lovely social yesterday, but need you to do a stretch break, so I see the counters in position. The question is going to be the usual. On recommended draft policy 2016-6, those that are in favor of the AC advancing this policy, please raise your hand nice and high. One popped up a bit late there enough as Dave was walking past. Thank you. You may lower your hands. Those that are opposed to advancing this policy, please raise your hand nice and high. I also see none up here, if that helps. Okay, those that did not raise their hand can now not lower it. We'll wait just a second for the online tabulation and the tally. Just to, oh. Ooh, I just assumed the time was going to, sorry, I lied, no break for you guys. But at the break, that would be a great time to find David or Owen, and if you had suggestions on text and such, to have comments. And of course, we do have the open mic after the break.
We will have a break, it's just after one more policy proposal.
All right, thank you, sir. And the envelope, please. On the matter of 2016-6, eliminate HD ratio from NRPM, in the room and remote, 129, in favor 18, against nil. Thank you very much. We'll pass that on, and John will introduce the next